Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
It can take over 10 years to bring a new ground system to life at a time when our adversaries' development cycle is 18 months or less. A new report from GAO suggests best practices that the Army could apply to now dramatically shorten its development cycle for these critical weapons. Joining Federal Drive host Terry Gerton with more earlier on the recommendations is Director of the Contracting and National Security Acquisitions Team at the Government Accountability Office, Mona Sehgal.
So the Army, in its 2021 modernization strategy, has laid out 6 key areas of modernization. Long-range fires, which includes these artillery and missile systems, is the top priority. And both the Senate and the House requested GAO to look at how the Army is progressing with respect to modernizing its long-range fires. So that was the basis of this particular audit.
And within DoD, our Army is not the only one that has long-range fires. Did you find they were working with the other services?
Yeah, so several of the systems that we looked at, the Army is working closely with the Navy on long-range hypersonic weapons. That's one of the systems. And the other one is mid-range capability. So there are definitely intersections in, yes, these are Army ground-based systems, but taking what other services might already have that can be adapted for a ground-based scenario.
That can be really complicated across the entire Department of Defense.
Yes, that is complicated. And one of the ways in which so there are benefits for sure. You know, you're taking missiles that exist or launchers that exist, you're adapting them. But yes, it's not easy. And when we get to certain recommendations, there are some challenges there because the Army is developing certain things, but the Navy may be developing other components. So just getting all of that to work together is a challenge.
Well, you really dug into the business practices and processes behind these program development efforts. What did you find?
So the Army is trying to develop, modernize a number of systems. And your listeners are probably familiar. The Army is using things like middle tier of acquisitions. So more expedited acquisition pathway, contracts such as other transaction agreements. These are not FAR-based, so there's more flexibility. And one area where we felt like we could help inform what the Army is doing is in terms of these leading practices. So this is a body of work that GAO has been developing over the last 2 decades. And what we have done systematically is we periodically go back to leading companies and see how do they develop their products. And a lot of the products now are not just hardware. Software is really important. So we try to see what are the practices they're using that allow them to develop products in a timely way and at scale. And those are the practices that we brought to bear when looking at the Army systems.
One of the things I thought was really interesting, because we all know how long it takes to develop defense systems, is that the Army had a real shift in focus. You addressed the issue of shifting from counterinsurgency to large-scale combat operations, kind of in the middle of these development programs. How did that affect their ability to bring the programs in on time?
So the programs that we are discussing in this report, there are a couple that started in 2016, 2018 timeframe. The others actually started after that. And so when we are looking at how they try to move these programs quicker, we were trying to just understand what kind of acquisition processes the Army is using. And you're right, there have been changes kind of midstream where Army adopted a newer acquisition approaches, again, to make these more tailored to the systems it is developing so that there is that flexibility to develop these systems faster. But what I would also say is, our other work has shown that it's still taking about 10 years to develop a system. That's still the average. And based on the threats that we face, 10 years is too long of a time frame. So really the practices that we are bringing to bear, in terms of what leading companies do, is to push that development process, the fielding process a little bit faster, because the time frames really that we are facing are much shorter.
I'm speaking with Mona Sehgal. She's a director in the Contracting and National Security Acquisitions team at the Government Accountability Office. That 10-year development cycle is about 4 times too long. I understand that we think the adversaries have about an 18-month cycle. So as you did your research, what did you come out with for recommendations?
So we had 3 recommendations. I'll take a step back. So we looked at 4 systems, 1 artillery system and 3 missile systems. The artillery system is the extended range cannon artillery, which that development started, it goes the furthest back, starting in 2016. And what we saw there was that the Army was trying to, use a system it already has, a chassis, and really upgrade it with a new turret, a cannon. The Army kept trying to really get the extended range it needed from this cannon, but there were multiple test failures. And really what it came down to was the technology that the Army was trying to work with was just not ready. But it still took the full 5-year period of the middle tier acquisition before the Army said, you know what, we're not doing this. And what we are recommending is something that the private companies do, which is, what is your business case? So it includes things like, do we have technology that is more or less ready? Can we do this within the cost and the schedule parameters that we have? And it's an ongoing evaluation, looking at what are we trying to develop? Will it still meet the client's customers' need? And if not, we cut our losses and move on to something else. So that's our recommendation. And what the Army is doing at this point is it's actually looking at our international peers, because they do have systems that are more advanced, maybe not quite the full extent the Army was hoping, but still can, deliver more than what some of our systems are doing. So they're doing a roadshow, they're checking out these systems, which is the right thing to do. It's the market research piece, which is really critical, and how private companies operate. The 3 missile systems, our recommendations are really focused on digital engineering. And this includes things like, there are a whole host of things that can be digital engineering. The pieces that we are really focusing are digital twins. So this is not like a static model that's just in a digital format, but it can upgrade real time as things are changing. So it provides a real advantage to people who are developing these systems, but also people who are using these systems. The second component of digital engineering is digital thread. And it's kind of a common set of information that's available to all stakeholders as these systems develop, as they go into sustainment. And we think if the Army adopted more of these practices, it can actually, the design iteration can happen faster. There are cost savings. There are definitely time savings associated with this. And it's not just limited to when the systems are being developed, but it really also affects the sustainment piece, which, comes down the road. So our recommendations to the Army are to adopt more of these digital engineering practices, because we think they have some real benefits in terms of trying to develop these systems quicker.
So that's really fascinating. Digital twins and digital threads are having a moment right now in terms of the conversation. And at the same time, as you talk about sustainment costs, Secretary Hegseth has been very clear that they want to buy back IP. They want to own the right to repair. So those seem to kind of go together. I'm interested, how did the Army respond? Do they feel like they have the capacity to actually implement those kinds of recommendations?
So the Army has agreed with all of our recommendations. DoD in 2023 actually put out their digital engineering instructions. So Any programs that started after that December 23 timeframe are required to use these tools. But these systems, as I mentioned, have been in development much prior to that. And we think, it's beneficial if the Army actually started looking at these systems that are in development and started using these tools. So they have agreed to implementing it. GAO actually will be doing another engagement where we are going to look at DoD's digital engineering efforts writ large. And that'll give us a much better sense of, how well is DoD progressing? What are some of the challenges? Maybe things that are unique to the services. So that's still to come.
Mona Sehgal is the director of the Contracting and National Security Acquisitions team within the Government Accountability Office.